Welcome to the Clean Power Hour Live. I'm Tim Montague, your co-host. Today is October 24th, and I am joined today by none other than the Commercial Solar Guys, usual, bringing you the greatest and latest solar, wind, and battery news. Welcome to the show, John.
Hello, Tim. Hello, Tim. You like my cool shirt, full bridge rectifier.
I have no
Very
idea what that
important.
is.
It's an important thing in the YouTube electrocute yourself. Have you ever heard of Electro Boom? It's an
No.
insane person who sets himself on fire occasionally on YouTube, and he's really entertaining. So,
Well,
yeah,
I have a new goal in life, to set myself on fire on YouTube. That sounds awesome.
full bridge rectifier. That's the accent. And we're also here with Dr. Wes Hersche, who's very
Yes,
cool and knows a whole bunch of stuff.
we have a special
And
guest. Welcome, Wes
Try to live
Hersche
up to
of
that. Thank you.
Prologis.
Yeah.
Prologis, excuse me.
Prologis. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, thank
and
you,
it's
Tim. Thanks, John.
and it's Dr. Wes Hersche, who my favorite part of his career is that he worked is it Arizona State University?
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
did my PhD there and worked there for quite a while.
Very cool.
And the cool thing is that like the PhD and work and everything is like in-depth hardcore solar. That's maybe the most advanced solar university in the United States. I mean, it makes sense. It's down there in
I would think so.
Arizona,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
like all the cool stuff not all the cool stuff, a whole bunch of the cool stuff
Okay,
seems to come out of
but
that
all of
place.
our listeners are not you, John. So for our listeners, we need Wes to explain
Yes, Wes, it's your turn.
what are you doing and why are you on the show?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm Director of Enterprise Sustainability at Prologis. Been here about a year now, so started at the beginning of the year. What I do is, so we can get into sort of how the company's set up and under our Chief Energy and Sustainability Officer, but we have a lot of key accounts who are our largest accounts for our real estate side of our business, right, which is the core of the business. And then we have several verticals essentially in on-site solar, on-site battery storage, EV charging infrastructure, microgrids. We also have a data center business, and we do some front-of-the-meter storage. We do a lot of stuff. But if you think about a lot of the larger customers, so I'll name a few that are in our 10K and are very public that are our customers. So like Amazon or Walmart or Maersk, they have a lot of different things that they're looking at with this, right? That might be interesting in terms of those verticals and sustainability. And so I manage those sort of transversely at the account level. And then we have a lot of different teams, both on the sales, development, and execution side for each one of those things I mentioned, that then go very deep in how we deliver. But so that's me. To pull back a bit for what the company does more generally is we have 1.3 billion square feet of real estate across 20 countries. So we're the largest logistics real estate company in the world. We're quite big. If you think about the way our Chief Energy and Sustainability Officer puts this, Susan Utaya-Kamar, is how do you further optimize those assets, right? Because that's 1.3 billion square feet of rooftop space. That's adjacent parking lots. That's opportunity, right? If you're thinking about it from a sort of enterprise sustainability or energy services or energy solutions point of view. So with that, that's all the teams that she has underneath her and her organization are thinking about, hey, our customers need this. And it sort of fits with, well, not sort of, I think it directly fits with Hamid, our CEO. He had this from the beginning with the company, where with logistics real estate companies, typically they're triple net leases. So you say, hey, pay the rent on time, kind of don't beat up the building, lock up when you leave kind of thing. But he had an insight, was like, well, wait a minute, what are those companies doing? And can we help them? So we have other business lines that are outside of sustainability. Like we have a group called Essentials that sells things like racking for warehouses or LED lighting or forklifts or move in, move out services. And then we're kind of an extension of that, right? Or we're fitting that same theme where we say, hey, customers want reliable, clean on-site energy. Customers are electrifying their fleets and need to be able to charge where they're doing transloading for Class 8 vehicles all the way down to employee vehicles. Customers need resilience, they need backup, they need battery energy storage, they need microgrids. So that's sort of the why of like why those things are set up. And again, my role is I have some of those key accounts where we're managing because we've got a lot of stuff in flight or a lot of stuff that there's interest. And then I'll try to sort of air traffic control, I guess, across those different things. So.
Yeah, and to set the table a little more, so first, Prologis is the largest industrial real estate developer in the world. And, you quickly learn in the C&I solar industry that third-party owned real estate is a challenging vertical to develop
Yes.
solar on,
Yep.
because the tenant isn't necessarily incentivized to invest in the building.
Correct.
They're leasing the space. But
Yeah.
Prologis also, you become aware of Prologis in the space because you are busy solarizing your facilities around the country like no other real estate company. And that's kind of how I know of Prologis. What about you, John?
I know of it because of Wes. I know the name as a high level because it's just a brand name in the world. What I now know is that you have 1 billion square feet,
1.3. Yeah.
1.3.
Yeah.
But does that billion, is that like rooftop space, or is that like multiple floors of space? Because
That's the floor surface area, but most of the
floor
stuff is
surface area.
single story. So yeah, that's pretty
All right.
close. But the
So let's
rooftop
say
space
1 billion.
is sure.
Let's
Yeah,
say
we
a
can
billion
round to
square feet of usable space.
Yeah.
20 watts per square foot. That's 20 billion watts. That's 20 gigawatts.
That would be my goal. But yeah,
Is that 20? Is that possible? Am I doing my math right? 20 billion
so.
watts
Yeah.
is 20 gigawatts. And if it's 20 gigawatts, which just doesn't sound right. No, it can't be right. Whatever it is, it's a massive volume. Like the United States could power itself with like 4 terawatts of solar? I mean,
Yeah, something like
it's just
that.
a huge
Well,
capacity of generation, man. It's just massive roofs.
to that point, we're trying to get the first gigawatt. So you got to start there. We're close.
Yeah.
We're still tracking towards that. When we set that goal several years ago, it was a bit of a stretch goal. It was pretty ambitious, but I think we got a good shot at it. I have full confidence we'll inevitably get there. The idea would be to get there by the end of this year or early into next year. So yeah. To your point, yes, huge upside opportunity. Want to get the first gigawatt done across the different projects that we've done. And I think, but you're nailing it on, like, the opportunity space is still huge, right? It's a little tricky, as I think you two know really well, because you're also super deep in this space. We started with just our own properties, and then the tenants that are in there, because they're the off takers, right? And so they need to be able to agree to that and set a price, etc. We do have what we call out a platform, which will look at real estate that's not owned by us. And there we typically like to prefer the first sort of place to go is where the customer that we already have, they own their own real estate. So that can be good because it's still only two parties. But then we've looked at third party as well. So then maybe it's even beyond that 1 billion-ish square feet of rooftop space, because again, you can just think about, you have all this when you start putting on your sort of opportunity hat, right? And you're thinking less about, like, yes, there's a carbon challenge, we're tackling that, but you say, hey, there's just an opportunity to start generating, like, where you're consuming. And then you could use that for other uses, if you said other parts of the electrification, which is sort of that handshake on the EV side or other side.
Transportation. I'm waiting for you. Yeah, I'm waiting for you to start talking about the big trucks, because these are the biggest vehicles with 200, 300, 400 shipping lanes going out of them. I used to load Lowe's trucks when I was in college. So I just used to walk down the shipping dock, and it was just this massive thing. You couldn't see the other end, and they had weather effects inside of the building. And it's just trying to comprehend the opportunity. I was trying to, you got the first one. Okay, great. 20 gigawatts. But how much transportation opportunity? How many trucks go in and out?
Yeah.
It sounds like layers. And that's even before you get to the energy storage.
I'll tell you two things that we've announced somewhat recently. One really recently, but I think it hits at this. So that team, our sort of a mobility team that's building out all that AV infrastructure. We did one that was really interesting, was called the Dinker site, Denker. That's the name of the street it's on. It's in Torrance, California. A company called Performance Team, which is a subsidiary of Maersk, is the customer for that. That's for their
shipping company. Is that's the big giant shipping company?
Yeah. And so Port of Long Beach and Port of LA are the two biggest ports, number one and number two and number one, I guess, in all of the Americas, North and South America. So there's by container volume, there's just a huge amount. So we set that up with them on their drayage runs. So because we know those are fixed runs, they're still Class 8, so semi trucks, electric, obviously. But you don't have these challenges where it's like, well, what if I want to go 1,000 miles nonstop and I'm not even going to stop to go to the restroom or whatever, uphill in the cold or whatever, right? You might have more challenges with that. And so we'll start with, most of the runs aren't actually these sort of crazy long haul runs. And there's a lot of opportunity for stuff that is known and shorter, relatively shorter distances. Maybe it's 100 miles or so. So you start by electrifying there. So that was one. But what was unique about that, or what is unique about that side, is that's a microgrid as well. And so there's backup storage. I think it's 18 megawatt hours of backup storage. You could do 9 megawatts peak, 3 megawatts on average, and you could charge 96 trucks concurrently. And then you can run hundreds through, right? Because they're sort of swapping in and out. So that's one. And then that's what we call our depot product. So that's like within the fence of some real estate asset that's being leased from us. We also have a new model that we're rolling out, and this is sort of we'd partner and do other stuff as well. That's a hub model, where it's like, in theory, you could pull your own personal Tesla in there and charge it if you want, but you set up these hubs typically for commercial vehicles or buses, or it doesn't have to be just Class 8. It could be box trucks, so, a couple different classes in between, and saying, okay, you got a public hub, you can come in and you can charge. And to your point, John, the real thing you have to unlock there, this is why partners are so important for that, is every company will have, they call them lanes, but a shipping route, right? Like, I know I need to run from here to here every day, 4 days a week, every week or whatever. And they have so many passenger truck miles that go on that lane. If you can get the charging infrastructure across those lanes where it's sufficient, where it's like, okay, now you can convert that lane to EV. You need the OEMs, you need a lot of other stuff, right? But we only build out the EV charging infrastructure. So that's sort of our play there. So as others build charging infrastructure as well, in a way, we're all sort of helping each other, because now that opens up more lanes, that puts more demand on the OEMs to build more electric trucks. And then you start to see this. And I think, I know you guys are both familiar with the sort of S-curve model of adoption, et cetera. I think with solar, we're eking up on that curve, but with EV electrification on the commercial side, we're way at the beginning, right? But you see we've seen this playbook before. We see positive signs in that direction. So yeah, we're still building. And on the depot side, there's a lot we could do. We also have workplace chargers as well. So for employees, if they want to come and charge their electric vehicle. So yeah, the variety of stuff. But again, It all comes back to, for us, like, we do all this for a couple of reasons. One, because our customers need it, right? I mean, you
want to get better rent. That's really what it comes down to.
Totally,
You guys are a real estate leasing company. You want higher LOIs. What is that? No, not LOIs. What is it that represent?
Yeah.
Now, there's a very specific term in the real estate world: the amount of money that a property makes. NOI.
NOI.
Is it?
Yeah,
NOI. Yes, NOI is the magic
Net
real
operating
estate word.
income.
Yeah,
yes,
and also additional revenue, right? Top line revenue, and then let's not forget the sustainability benefit, right? Like, why we probably all got in this business to begin with. So you say, oh, okay, great. Those sustainability impacts that you can have as you start to decarbonize, like across all these different components of the business, is useful. And if I could be a sustainability geek for just a couple seconds, what's interesting about Prologis is that if you look at our, you have scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. For the viewers that don't geek out with this stuff, scope 1 is anything you burn in something you own. So if you burn methane, if you burn fuel, whatever that is. Scope 2 is electricity, essentially like the emissions associated with electricity. Scope 3 is the entire rest of your value chain, so upstream and downstream. If you look at us as a company, over 99% of our emissions are scope 3. So because we don't own fleets, we don't own a lot of operating equipment. That's all owned by our customers. So now you see our biggest footprint is that scope 3. Of that, 70% of it is the power consumed in our buildings by our tenants. So then if you look even and say, we have a net zero target by 2040, we're a signatory of the Climate Pledge, which is something that Amazon co-founded. So we're part of that. I think there's 600 signatories to that now. But if you look at like our path to decarbonization, again, like it goes through the route of how do we help these customers that are in our buildings decarbonize as well. And so you sort of see this like sort of triple benefit, I guess, right, in terms of what we're trying to do.
There's a lot going on there.
There's a lot. It's fun. I don't
that's cool.
Get bored.
I wonder, Wes, in the solar industry, we're very familiar with this phenomenon that it is a regional industry.
Mhm.
The Northeast, parts of the Southeast, Texas, California, parts of the Midwest, really Illinois right now are kind of hotspots.
Yeah.
But when it comes to this, I think the tripartite for me is EV charging infrastructure, batteries, and solar. When it comes to your portfolio and your priorities, paint us a little picture of where you are
Yeah.
actively developing that tripartite of projects.
Yeah, that'd take a lot to unpack. So the simple answer to that, but it's not a very good one, is
Cliff notes.
yeah, is everywhere where there's opportunity, right? So if you take each one of those individually, so you say solar, like you've already identified where the hotspots are, because those are places like
But what about all
where,
three combined? That's what we're
yeah,
looking
yeah,
for.
yeah.
We want the hottest spots.
I mean, the obvious answer I think is California, just to be really blunt, because there's a lot of different incentives, both on the EV side and the LCFS comes into play. You have typically higher electricity costs than other parts of the country.
But
Regulatory
there's no
environment.
solar incentives.
Correct. No, yeah, this is on the LCFS, but you have
Yeah.
higher electricity prices, so sometimes your
that works
solar
it out.
projects can look more economically favorable. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I mean, so the regulatory environment does matter a lot. The incentives matter a lot, especially I think more so on the electrification side, on the EV side, because again, we're newer in that S curve. A lot of times on the solar side, I see this more as like there are those markets where they're already bankable, or they can already see like enjoy some type of cost reduction benefit for the customer, and so they're very interested in moving forward with that. Some states and areas, sort of, it depends, right? It's a little more of an edge case, like maybe not. And then on the microgrid side, everywhere really, right? Because that's more determined by what's your sort of your operational nodes that are like must be running right at all times, where you're looking and saying, like, we've had some customers put it, and I won't quote dollar figures, but they're like, hey, look, if this building shut down, we're processing so much freight or goods or services through there, you know, the the millions of dollars that would cost or whatever, even by the day or the hour or whatnot, is so detrimental. Like this facility has to run all the time, even if the grid goes down, even if whatever, like it's so essential to their business. And
You guys use the term VOL there by any chance? VOL, value of lost revenue. There's a term out there
that's
in the world.
interesting. No,
I think it's called VOL.
Okay, I need to look that up. Yeah.
So regarding microgrid stuff, do you guys do any sort of vehicle to grid with any of these massive batteries yet that are in these big old trucks?
No, I don't think we have. That's an interesting point. No, yeah. I need to bring that to the team so we can look at that. As far as I know, no, I'm sure someone's been looking at it, but as far as I know, we haven't put anything there yet. So
I assume demand charge management and backup, because you have this flow of trucks that if you use them just little tiny bits, it's not really going to slow down their charging. Maybe it will, but you know, that's big. Those are big units. You know, you how to manage those and use them in the holistic manner with your system. You have your solar, you have your storage, you have your EV backup. Now, how do you make use of that megawatt hours of EV batteries that are rolling around? So it's just another equation to your another variable in your equation.
No, you put it right. The microgrid side of things, it's super interesting because you start thinking about, like, the way I think about it is like a set of variables in an optimization stack. So and then you can even get to almost philosophical levels around, like, are you essentially grid tied and then you have that microgrid system as your backup, or are you running more off of that system and then the grid is your backup, right? And then you get to think about, like, if I have a time of use utility tariff, like, does that come into a factor where I'm sort of doing that in time arbitrage? Am I optimizing for carbon? Am I optimizing for times of use and operations? That gets to be a really interesting system engineering problem.
Yes, you're optimizing for them all, Wes. Every one of them. That's your job.
Yeah, and it's always a little bit bespoke, at least right now, right? Like, I imagine that as an industry will start to normalize over time as we start to understand, like, how to sort of achieve all these different optimization problems we're trying to solve for. But it's I think a little more complicated than EVs or solar, which is already complicated, to be clear, right? But it's a fun space, right? We all get to figure that out together, which I think is cool. So
interesting. So I got a question that's slightly outside of Prologis. I don't know if Tim's going to let me He might have other key questions though, because he also wants to focus on the stuff for CNI people. Like, how
Yeah.
should developers come to you that have buildings nearby you? How should contractors become a proper vendor? I know
Yep.
becoming a vendor with a group like Prologis is probably a lot of insurance, payment bonds, and a lot of documentation, so in history. But still, even that, just being able to fill out paperwork, you guys are probably looking for certain standards that are really high, like small shops. Probably it's
Yeah.
just like, have a great day. It's nice to know you. Maybe you can be a sub, but that type of stuff matters, and it's hard to even, it's
Yeah.
intimidating because you think the amount of work to even become an approved vendor in and
Yeah.
of itself may still not mean you have any work, and you're a little shop with 2 office people. I'm thinking about myself clearly, how to work with groups, and we've worked with a couple of large asset owners across the
Yeah.
US, and you negotiate a contract for 3 months, and then it's like, yeah, maybe we'll have a project. It's like, wow,
Yeah. So
that's great.
typically for those questions, I'll turn those over to our execution team because they work with a
Yeah.
number of BPCs, and that's a great team. They have quite a few people. Well, we have both a development team and then an execution team, and they work through those processes and vetting those vendors, et cetera. So, and yeah, we do have really high quality standards in terms of delivery and execution there. So, but yeah, I mean, never hurts. So we'll talk after the show to be like,
Oh
hey,
no, I
here's
wasn't
what we
sales
talked
pitching me.
about.
No. I
No,
wasn't
it's good.
explicitly sales pitching me. I was just talking to broader
generally.
people, the people that listen to us across the nation that
No, that's
now know that you got a
absolutely.
billion square feet, Wes. They all know. They're going to
A
quote
lot
that.
of work
They're
to
going to
do.
call
So,
you. Yeah. So my question that's outside of Prologis is,
yeah.
what is the coolest piece of research thing that you've had to think about, either via your research, getting your PhDs and the work? Because I know some of your
Oh,
cool research,
yeah.
or in your work afterwards that you're allowed to like talk about with an NDA.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
you've worked for a bunch of cool people after school and before Prologis. Like I know you've worked for
Yeah.
Amazon directly, you've worked for Boston Consulting, you've
Yeah.
probably been asked some really cool questions, but include your research too.
Sure.
Because just the coolest question that you've ever thought about.
Let
Solar
me
related, solar and
sure,
storage.
sure. Let me answer the second part of that
Yeah.
first. I have had I think a fun career history at least. So yeah, to your point, did a PhD at Arizona State University, worked there as a research director, was at Boston Consulting Group, and then was at AWS and Amazon for a number of years before coming to the role I'm in now in Prologis. There's a good book. Oh, I can't remember his last name. It's called Range. That talks a bit about this, about sort of some of the advantages of, they're looking at like kids in sports and other things about, do you specialize really early, right? Like if you know your kid is going to play tennis, do you just put them in 24/7 tennis lessons from the time they're 5 years old? And they were making an argument, I think, about Roger Federer and a couple other people about playing a variety of sports and sort of seeing different things and different aspects of it. That gives you some range. And then when you go to tackle some problem you're in, it often gives you sort of a different framing or different frames to be able to look at something at. So I think if anything, for my career history and sort of the stuff I've done, to me, that's the number one benefit, just because I've seen this from a couple different angles, right? From an advisory side, from a research side, from a operational side with Amazon and Prologis now, and either on the customer side or on the sales side. So that's been interesting. I don't have anything nuggets of wisdom from that other than like, I think it helps like when you come in and you're just trying to sort of like figure out how we could solve these. Most of the stuff that I think you all tackle and that we tackle, some's a little more straightforward than others, but there's always sort of idiosyncrasies and complications and things that you're trying to think through and work through. And so I think that background helps a lot. On the research side, something that I'm still trying to work my way through is this report that came out. I actually posted about it on LinkedIn. This report that came out from Ember, EMBER.
Yeah. Yep.
That think tank. I think they're out of the UK. Yep. On the electrostate and sort of what's going on there. I watched the sort of YouTube announcement they did. It was this 1 hour and a half video. That guy's name's Don something. Apologies, I have to think of the name. I'll post it as a comment in YouTube whenever this video comes out. But he had an amazing breakdown even for the half hour that he was going over that. They called out a couple things that I'd been hearing from other sources, and I'm assuming they're the ones that came up with this. So as an example that's related to solar, if you look at the amount of panels that are modules that China's putting out right now, that infrastructure, like to get to that level where they're at now, was about a $50 billion investment. which sounds like a lot of money, but on a national scale, that's nothing. Like that, we just to maintain the existing oil and gas industry in the U.S. is about 400 billion for a reference point, right? Annual. So you look and say like a $50 billion investment, very concerted, obviously, and sort of top down from that government, but got them to the point where they can now manufacture probably a terawatt every other year. It looks like once they hit full capacity, maybe more.
Well, they're beyond the terawatt. They're actually pulling back. They're at like 1.2, 1.3 terawatts. They're running 50, 60% capacity factor right now.
Oh, so I didn't know that, but it's wild, right? So then you look and say, okay, well, that's not that big of investment. So in terms of like, what gives me hope there, I think like, okay, well, in terms of, industrial policy or national industrial policy, I think there's a lot of other countries that certainly can invest $50 billion or more in order to build out that infrastructure. There's probably some specifics around like where you do that at, but that gives great hope. And then you start looking at like, and we'll use them as an example. The case that Ember was trying to make was that they're trying to emerge to become the first electro state. And they use this new term that keeps getting thrown around on electrotech, as opposed to like a petro state or whatever. I think that's super interesting, right? Like in terms of that development.
Sure.
And some of the stuff that we just talked about, I think is the handshake, because people look at that and they look at the pan and they say, okay, well, you can sell it for so much per watt, but you start looking at the generation you can get off of that. And then you start looking as you electrify your economy, particularly around transportation, a couple other areas. And you're like, if you stop looking at primary energy inputs, which is typically measured in thermal BTUs or something that's more on the combustion side, and you just look at the energy service output, like to make this vehicle move 1 kilometer, like what did it take, right? And you have so much more efficiency in the chain on the electricity side, right? So now and you say, oh, and we can produce that electricity so much cheaper with a relatively small investment, globally speaking. So anyway, that whole research I found fascinating. I haven't got the report's quite long and dense, so I haven't worked my way through it entirely yet. But I've been trying to work through it because I found that to be really fascinating, and also, again, sort of hopeful, thinking, it's good for China that they did it. I don't live in China, so I'm more interested in the country where I live or other places that would be making similar investments, and then thinking about like how they can have that operational reach and efficiency. So that's exciting.
That's neat. I like those Ember reports. They're cool. They have a good website that just looks neat and shiny. I like all their charts.
My takeaway my takeaway from that Ember report was that we could completely solar and batteryize many facilities with a fairly modest amount of rooftop solar. This is more thinking in the resi space, but like put a 5 kW solar array and a 30 kilowatt hour battery, and boom, you're done. Now, obviously, this gets harder as you scale up, and industrial facilities that are running 24/7 is a whole different animal.
Yeah.
But Wes, back to this question of priorities. I'm very curious what is the lens that Prologis? Surely you have some kind of a filter that you're running opportunities through, because you have so many opportunities.
Yeah.
And a billion square feet of opportunities.
A billion opportunities. But how do you filter? And okay, there's this goal of NOI, which looms large, and I'm gonna hopefully show us a bar chart I'm working on here with Perplexity, but of how Prologis ranks in the scheme of things compared to other big corporate buyers, because a gigawatt is a big number. Oh, sorry, a terawatt, right? Are you approaching it?
Not a terawatt, yeah.
You're approaching a gigawatt.
Yeah, that'll be next.
And there's a handful of corporate buyers that are exceeding that. I think Amazon is the largest now.
On offsite, Amazon's they're 30 some gigawatts, I think. Yeah.
Oh, 30?
For their offsite PPA portfolio, I'd have to look, but I think it's quite a lot. I know it's more than 20. So
okay,
yeah,
I just have a statewide bar chart, and we're talking about some of the usual suspects here: Texas, California, Illinois, Iowa, New York, North Carolina, New Jersey. Is there a state that you're actively involved in that's not on that list, for example?
I'd have to think about that. I mean, so I take a pretty wide filter approach, right? Because there's a couple different factors. So one, you'd have to think about sort of where you're going to potentially get break even and or cost savings on the system itself versus whatever the electric utility price is. Then there's if your customer has an internal cost of carbon. So you're thinking about the carbon savings you're getting, is that a nice to have? Do they actually factor that in? Does it matter? That also tells you a lot about like if that customer has sort of a willingness to do this purely from a financial reason or a sustainability reason or some kind of combo, et cetera. And then on top of that, like you have other considerations for us on our side in terms of like what's the remaining lease term for that particular site. So part of our, well, it's not really our secret sauce, I guess, but one of the things we do is we always set up those PPA contracts to be coterminous with the lease. So that's a big one in terms of giving that customer, in terms of when they sign up for that offtake agreement, peace of mind, because most of their real estate decisions, unfortunately, like are not driven on their sustainability or solar, right? Like they have operational concerns about why they need to be in some space or why they might need to move or maybe they need to expand, et cetera. So they're thinking through that. So that's part of what we have to take into the mix. But those filters end up becoming a somewhat more complex combination of filters. So, but those are some of the big ones. And then from there, like we start to work with customers to say, hey, okay, hey, here's what we think in terms of they may have more than one lease with us. So we'll look at those and see like what makes sense and and go from there. So without getting too specific, but yeah.
It really seems a lot of the equation is driven by the occupant.
And yeah. I mean, they're the off taker, right? So
yeah.
Because again, that comes back to we don't really consume power, right? Other than our offices or whatnot. So and then also too, like a big one is what the occupant is doing inside that building, right? But take Amazon as an example because they're a known customer. Like they have a lot of times people talk about Amazon fulfillment centers, but they actually have a couple different dozen building types, right? Some of them don't have they're not quite as full. They could be like a cross dock or an interchange facility or different facility types that they have. Some of them are the ones that you typically see, like the fulfillment centers you would see on TV that are full of robots and they're running off of AI. Like there's a lot of stuff going on, so they're going to have much higher loads. So that can also, you're thinking about that with your system sizing, et cetera. Like it gets pretty complicated, as I imagine you two can appreciate.
So my question is, what should we be asking? I think of you as the supercomputer, and I'm just a lowly solar professional here in the weeds, trying to help EPCs get a grip on large C&I solar and batteries. What are the trends? What do they need to know? What do they need to be leaning into? And I guess where is the puck going? Because as a large real estate developer, Prologis, sorry, I'm going to say it wrong. I've just been saying it wrong for so many years now. My brain can't recompute that. But Prologis is, thinking far into the future also. What should we be asking?
Oh, I would say
a combined system. What I heard is that you need to come to you with a package of solutions that integrate everything that's looking at that building. Look at the trucks, look at the batteries, look at the electricity, look at the demand charge, look at a facility, be conscious of the use, be conscious of the state laws. We need to be more than just some dudes throwing up some modules and an inverter. We got to take into account your demand charge. We got to know what your real bill is. We got to be conscious of your real estate realities. There's layers there.
I think, I'd agree. There are definitely some of those layers. There's also, again, I don't work as much on the execution side, but I think that's probably where the EPC conversation would live. I know for the parts of that I see or that I'm closer to, there's a lot of considerations even on the install and making sure you're not disrupting operations. Like we coordinate obviously with the tenant on that, and that's sort of worked out. But EPCs that we can work with that sort of understand that, because again, the value oftentimes of what's going on in that building, can exceed the cost savings pretty quickly of solar that you would get, even on a very favorable system, right? So taking those precautions, making sure, we don't have thermal events, we don't have roof punctures, et cetera, which we have a track record on that. Preserving that's really, really important to us. And then to your point, John, I think it's a bit more holistic. in terms of the different things. Now, some of that, like, again, we do internally already. That's part of what our development execution teams are running. But yeah, it's always good to have partners that we're working with that are cognizant of those things.
Well, and to John's note, like, I'm familiar with a platform called Alexity, Elexity, out of Oregon, which is a building management controls platform.
Yeah.
It'll control the chargers, the EV chargers, the HVAC, the lighting, the solar and batteries, and do that in an intelligent way to reduce the energy charges, right? They're attacking demand charges or capacity charges depending on the market.
Yep.
And is Prologis getting into this space of building management?
So we have one thing I didn't mention, and I think about it, is we also have a ventures team. So Prologis Ventures, they do two things. And this is going to be a roundabout answer to your question. In one sense, they operate as a traditional venture capital firm, but their investment thesis are things that would be helpful to Prologis or to our customers. So that could be physical things in the warehouse. That could be these building management systems. It's a variety of things. And then within that, there's a couple different sort of pillars, I guess. Sustainability is one of those, where they're looking at, like, hey, a lot of our customers have sustainability goals related to sort of energy, carbon, et cetera. So they'll go and look for those investment opportunities for companies. And I'm trying to think offhand. I don't have their full sort of list of portcos right now. But they look a lot at that on the tech side, especially on the startup tech side, to where they might be able to make those investments. They also help us incubate stuff if we're going to bring something in-house. So we're starting up, say, something new, then the ventures team that oftentimes will come from there. But I think, like, that's more in their wheelhouse, where they'll start to look at some of that tech and then think about, is that suitable for us? Is it suitable for our customers? A lot of times I don't know, because I don't know the specifics on that particular company. A lot of times, a lot of that tech, what I see, ends up being more useful for our customers than for us necessarily. Because again, they have all the operations within the building. A lot of times on a triple net lease, especially, they might be looking for those tools. So that's great. Like, if they use those and utilize those, then great. It typically can then, I think, drive or highlight the value of the verticals we have in terms of EV charging infrastructure, solar, battery storage, et cetera. Because they say, okay, cool, I have a clearer idea of what the benefit with this will be now. Now, our teams also help with that, obviously, particularly on our account management teams. But yeah, if those other players are in the space and they're sort of trying to get them efficiency gains and then looking for other ways that they can help, then what is the expression? Takes a village, I guess, to do that. So yeah, we're happy to work with partners.
Do you have any plans to utilize what might be empty roof space based on on-site demand? I assume you probably only need a half or a quarter of your roofs in a massive number of your cases to offset on-site electricity.
Yeah.
And so, like, say in Tim's world, in my world, Massachusetts,
Yep.
if you offset your electricity with half your roof, the second half of your roof, you can sell 100% of that. And this isn't to offset Prologis. Now I don't know what your company's name is anymore.
Prologis,
yeah. It isn't to offset Prologis, but it's to add NOI. And maybe you just lease a roof, or maybe you own it as an asset under ventures. You have Prologis Energy Resources, and that's a whole separate arm where you just have power plants, straight up power plants, leasing roof space.
We have launched, especially in the last year or so, quite a few community solar projects. I think that's getting at the same thing. Yeah, because you look and say, like, the load's not high enough inside that building to sort of soak up all of that generation that you could get. And we're like, well, you're up there already. Why not make better use of that roof? And a lot of times those programs then can be available to the community. So those are good. Those are popular, particularly in Illinois and a couple other places where you can do those. So yeah, I have to go look. I should have brought stats ready and for that. I don't remember how many of those we've done, but I know we've done quite a few. We had we call them flip the switch events. So we'll do sort of a public event for some of the, like if we're commissioning a new solar site, or in this case, we did a community solar one earlier this year in Chicago area, I should say. I wasn't at that one, but yeah, it's another part of our business. Because again, I'm going to keep doing this. Like, if you pull back, I keep coming back to what Susan said, our Chief Energy and Sustainability Officer. She said, look, I have all of this space that I can optimize to play with, essentially, right? Like, and figure out like, how do we get more out of this? She came up with a thesis around power as a platform, and saying like, in the switch, I think, that flips in the minds of the consumers, the partners that we work with, is not so much thinking about like, well, hey, like, we're not going to be able to do something in this particular state or whatever because it's really hard and difficult or whatnot. It's like, that's fine. Look at all the opportunity that you do have. Just start there and say, like, where is it that I have underutilized or under optimized space that I could be getting electrons, I could be getting charging, I could be getting all whatever that service is, right? And now that sort of flips the switch in the mind of, you're not like, I don't know how to say this, you're not looking for like how to have a perfect solution for all problems worldwide. You're pulling from that subset and saying, hey, I don't know how we're going to get to that last 10%, but I do know the first 10% is looking pretty clear in terms of what the value proposition of that is. And then you roll out and start doing that, right? And then you get to the next 10%, et cetera. So, but yeah, there's a ton of opportunity. So that's why too, when you look at like, wow, geez, you guys got a lot of different verticals and stuff you're doing, you know, across community solar, front of the meter, behind the meter storage, et cetera, solar, EV charging, microgrids. And it's like, right, because once you put on that opportunity mindset, you're like, yeah, there's a lot of different areas where we could be getting more out of this asset. So
if we fast forward to 2030 and bring you back on the show,
do
you think this conversation would be significantly different?
I don't know. It's interesting. Like, I think like a lot of the fundamental technologies that we all use and utilize, there'll be innovation for sure. But I'm kind of in the like no breakthroughs needed camp, I guess. Right? Like I don't know that maybe there'll be small, medium nuclear reactors. There might be some other stuff that sort of comes on and incremental. Great. Like if that stuff
not by 2030 though.
Well,
maybe we'll have one or two,
right? Yeah, you might have some R&D.
Hopefully.
Well, yeah. and there's like other stuff that doesn't really touch us as much, but is really cool. So like I don't know if you guys saw the
can't build a nuclear reactor in 5 years.
Well, yeah,
can't do it.
But did you guys see the news on Rondo, the energy source?
Yes.
Right. So that came online, right? We don't really play in that space too much because we.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love the heat battery.
Yeah,
but you could play in the space with Tim Latimer and geothermal. What's his group? Like you could
Geo.
Yeah, but I can't remember what his group is right now. But Tim Latimer, he was the big first advanced geothermal group pumping out electricity.
Yeah,
he's meeting critical. So you could surround some of your Wichita things because you got tons of land space out there with these 5-10 megawatt geothermal units.
Is that shallow or deep geo, John? Do you know?
That's like 4,000 to 15,000 feet. So I think that means deep. I don't know, but yes,
15,000 is deep.
Yeah. It's the fracking guys.
That one, geothermal for sure. And then the other one that I've been kind of fascinated with lately is a geo-sourced or geothermal heat pump as well.
Vervo Energy.
Vervo. I've talked to Bedrock Energy as well. I thought their tech is really cool. So we've been looking at that. There's a couple different, right, where you're like, hey, look, again, just how many different ways can you optimize this? Yeah. And if you have high heating and cooling loads and you're like, how do we solve that? And it's like, well, the earth is usually cooler or hotter than what your building is. And well, interesting. That's a thermal exchange opportunity. There's some sort of technical components to that around drilling and whatnot. But yeah, like it's interesting, right? It's fascinating. So I don't know. So that's what I was saying. By 2030, maybe we'll be doing more of all of those. And then ideally we'd be at 2 gigawatts of solar by then. That's a goal we have, or at least to keep pushing on that. I don't know. I hope we're continuing to do the things that we're already doing. So the other thing too is it's not that far away, right? What's 2030?
No, it's like 4 years away.
Yeah, exactly.
I was glad to hear you mention Bedrock. We had Jocelyn Lai, the co-founder of Bedrock, on the show. Check out episode 260.
Yeah, and, Jocelyn's great. That team's great. So yeah, really
cool. I think we're going to see a lot more geo, but it doesn't. It's not easy to beat solar and batteries. That's
yeah. Well, that's the other stuff that some of the Ember research is pointing out. I mean, I did research on this too when I was at ASU. It's really hard to beat the energy source that gives you 100,000 times more energy than what you need on any given day. Yeah, like that's quite abundant. There's complications. Obviously, you have to convert that energy, right? But yeah, I'm very bullish on that fact of physics in the universe. So
We're going to wrap up the show here in a few minutes, but
Yeah.
when we're going through a contraction, thanks to what's going on at the federal level, right?
Yeah.
The industry is going through a contraction. How do you see that changing the landscape in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I think again, like when we look at what we do, like we're only focused on how do we address directly the consumption, electricity consumption at the site, right? So we're all on site, we're all rooftop. I think, like in my mind, there will always be a place for that because it's more of a prosumer model, right? Where you're looking and saying, hey, look, I have electric load. I could get that load addressed cost effectively from the most abundant resource in the universe. I think it's always going to be compelling, right? Or it'll be hard to make a case that won't be compelling. So yeah, like I saw different regulatory changes that certainly will affect us, and sort of we're thinking through what that looks like. Again, on fundamentals, I'm still pretty bullish. And also, there's other ways that we're addressing on-site energy generation, right? So we talked about geothermal. We talked about Danker, which is a linear generator, non-combustive methane. So that can help fill in, I think, some gaps in different places. There's a lot of different ways. Again, if you start thinking of that power as a platform, I don't think that's going to change. So yeah, I think we'll deal with regulations as they come, but fundamentals, I think, are still very strong there.
The effluent from non-combustive methane, is that still CO2?
The effluent, I don't know. I'm not a chemist, so I'll
Okay.
have to look at that. Yeah, I do know on that particular site, especially for Mainspring, which is the technology partner we use there, there's no SOx and NOx, which is a big one. So if you start looking at CO2e, especially because those have much higher greenhouse gas warming potential, that makes a big difference in terms of what it does to the overall CO2e equation. The other big thing with that particular technology I probably should mention is they're actually fuel agnostic. So you could do ammonia, you could do hydrogen as well. So those today, if performance team wanted to go in and switch that out and say, actually, we're going to switch all those to hydrogen, and we have a sort of hydrogen fuel source supply that we want to bring in, like they could, it wouldn't affect operations. They could switch those over. So all the stuff that we're doing, we call it our on-demand solutions. Like we always pick a fuel agnostic technology choice for that reason, because we're like, okay, we don't want to lock in. So like this works now. In a lot of cases, it ends up having a lower overall CO2e emission profile than the grid, depending on what it is for that particular grid where they're at. But we also say like, hey, you might want to fully decarbonize this in the future. So you have to have a technology choice that can flex to that for you. I don't know about the effluent though. I'll look into that. I'm not as strong in chemistry.
I'm glad I could stump the supercomputer.
So, yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank Wesley Hersche, Sustainability
you,
Executive. You are the Director of Enterprise Sustainability at Prologis and formerly of Amazon.
Yeah.
We didn't talk enough probably about Amazon, but we're going to have you back on the show, Wesley.
Okay, next time.
Yep. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please tell a friend about the show. That's probably the best thing you can do for your life period. And John, I want to thank our co-host, John Weaver. John, how can our listeners find you?
Commercialsolarguy.com is number one. LinkedIn, I'm there way too often. You can read about me on PV Magazine, USA. And I'm on Blue Sky. I like to share pictures there of construction and all kinds of stuff.
Nice. Can I share one thing? Sorry.
Please.
You know what I didn't get to say?
Yeah.
This is so true, though. I've been a long-time listener, first time, guest. So yes, to what Tim said and what John said, everyone should be watching the show. It's good. I'm subscribed on YouTube. I have the little notifications on LinkedIn. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm on there way too often, as John said. So yes.
Yeah. All of us.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Tim, where can we find you, Tim?
Yeah.
In my home studio here in Champaign, Illinois, but I'm active on LinkedIn. That's pretty much the only place I'm super active. And I am going to Tennessee next week, though. I'll be in Nashville. I'll be at RE Plus Midwest in Chicago in December. So I would love to meet you live if you would come to Nashville or Chicago. And then it's on to RE Plus Boston, I think, in what is that, February? Oh, no, Intersolar maybe in San Diego. so many good conferences coming up. But all right, well, that's a wrap with the Clean Power Hour Live. I want to thank you all for listening and see you in a week. We're going to do a show in a week because we had to skip last week. So anyway, we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, guys.